What's up, guys? I'm Jason Silva, and it is my honor to be sitting with my dear friend, Stephen Kotler. As the Edge Foundation famously said, to arrive at the edge of the world's knowledge, to gather the world's most interesting minds, to put them together in a room, and to have them ask each other the questions they've been asking themselves. That's a motto I can live by. So, Kotler, I have so many questions about your new novel, Last Tango in Cyberspace. I mean, are you going to literally make my third eye open with this one? I mean, you've written so many fascinating books, right? The Rise of Superman, Decoding the Science of Human Performance, Abundance, Why the Future Will Be Better Than You Think, Bold, you go into the world of emerging technologies, exponential, Ray Kurzweil, singularity, all that jazz, and yet you write a book about flow and human performance and consciousness, and then you co-write Stealing Fire, about stealing fire from the gods and decoding altered states. And so it's like your interests overlap in pretty much everything that I'm into, and you're converging all of these things into a novel now in The Last Tango in Cyberspace. So I feel like I'm gonna get sucked in. So first and foremost, sell me the concept, tell me the book. What's the title all about? What are the references to William Gibson or Blade Runner or all these other kind of cybernetic counterculture?
Good play. We'll start with the title.
Yeah.
Last Tango in Cyberspace. So Cyberspace, author William Gibson, right? Cyberpunk, early, near future sci-fi, noir, kind of birthed the whole hacker generation.
That's right.
He used cyberspace as his term for the shared mind space created by the internet, right? Suddenly people who were geographically isolated were now sharing the same mind space. They were collaborating cognitively in ways they'd never imagined, right? And he called cyberspace, he defined it as a shared consensual hallucination, right? And shared is the operative term. For that to work, you have to be able to trust the information that's being shared.
That's right.
Right? And we're moving into a world where whether it's AI doing fake news or it's Facebook filtering our messages, et cetera,
that we have fragmented hallucinations instead of
exactly.
consensual hallucinations. People are
fragmented-
living in their filter bubbles, essentially living in their own intermediated reality, where the feedback loops of fake news and whatever they're interested in gets an algorithm to feed them more of that, and people are splintering and bifurcating into essentially living in their own universes. But the problem with that is that we don't have then consensus anymore. And so society's like, what the hell is happening? How do we work together if we don't have any consensus?
And so Last Tango in Cyberspace is the end of something radically new, right? And the other thing, and the other side of what you just said that really gets it, that I'm talking in one sense about the shared space of the internet. The other thing is I'm talking about the entire texture of reality has really changed over the past 20 years. Now you go back into the 90s, pre-internet, reality felt different. The world felt smaller. There was a phenomenological quality, right? And that quality, the qualia of the universe, in a sense, is different now. But technology is moving so fast, which is what the book is also about, that even 5 years from now, that whole texture, the phenomenology of what it means to be alive is going to be totally radically different 5 years from now.
That's interesting. So you're talking about the felt experience of subjectivity. I mean, we're talking essentially about subjectivity, and you're saying that these technologies, whether we're aware of it or not, they mediate our subjectivity. The feedback loops between us and our tools mediate our subjectivity.
Absolutely.
The feedback loops between us and our environments mediate our subjectivity. Our interaction with other people mediates our subjectivity.
Love, right? Love for you is totally mediated by cinema. It's been that way forever. 100%. And now, suddenly, with AR, with VR, with mixed reality, the line between cinema and reality and all the, we're going to add information layers to reality, and it's all going to get so much more blurry. Last Tango in Cyberspace.
And the fact that these technologies and the capacity of these technologies to transform basically the felt experience of reality is accelerating exponentially.
Yes.
Because we used to live in a world in which you were born and you died and didn't change very much. Technology always transformed the world, but that accrued over many generations. But because of these exponential trends, it's like that line that says that there are decades where nothing happens and weeks when decades happen. And on the back of exponential technologies, as Kurzweil famously said, 30 linear steps gets you to 30 exponential steps gets you to a billion. And we're making these exponential leaps. We're turning supercomputers into pocket-sized devices. In the next 25 years, pocket-sized devices will be nanobots in our brains. And it's going so fast that people experience a kind of vertigo because the brain simply can't keep up. Our intuition continues to be linear. The world is exponential. The effect of which is a kind of dizzying vertigo where it's like, what the hell do we do and who do we turn to? And this is where I'm interested in your point of view, because as Marshall McLuhan said, it's always the artist who realizes that the future is the present and uses his work to prepare the grounds for it. You are the artist here, so paint this picture for me. So the book delves into the felt experience of these changes and how they're going to transform the mind.
Yeah, the mind and consciousness and shape reality in really new and radically different ways. I'll give you another example. So the uncanny valley, right? The uncanny valley is this thing in roboticists when you have a robot or any animatronic figure that almost mimics life but doesn't quite get there, and we detect something's wrong and we're revolted by it, right? And this is an innate thing, and it's because we all come with sort of built-in life detection machinery. And when the life detection machinery spots a fake, kinesthetic problems happen, right?
Immediately so.
But we're getting to a point where we're not going to be able to tell the difference between the fake and the real thing, right? We're not going to understand, the fundamental way what's alive and what isn't anymore. That barrier, and I'm not talking about like, yes, we'll have definitions, right? But I'm talking about the felt experience of the world, right? And we've all had this experience where like, remember when you first started talking to Siri and it was really difficult, and then suddenly Siri understood your voice and it starts to come online. You get to that moment where you're like, am I talking to a person or a computer? Right, it crosses the threshold.
And people keep asking the philosophical question of when will we know if AI actually is alive? When will we know if it's sentient?
Right, it's the core
question. But the truth of the matter is that I think we'll stop asking the question when the feedback with us and the AI is so intuitive and so second nature. And like, I've seen babies talk to Alexa, and the way that Alexa responds to my friend's 4-year-old is so intuitive that she just treats it as an entity at some point. Yeah. We'll just stop asking the question.
So I point this out in the book. Everybody thinks that like there's a singularity point when an AI becomes conscious, right? That's going to be a big thing. And yes, of course, whatever. Sure. It will be a big thing. But there's a point before that, which is coming very quickly, where we can no longer tell what's conscious and what's not, right? The illusion is so good that we lose, and we've never lived in a world where the things we make possess life. They've always been the things we've made. We've made inanimate tools forever, and that threshold, and I don't think I don't even think people are looking at it, and I think it's actually going to have, especially if you're talking about the phenomenology of the world. How does the world make us feel? It's going to radically change, right?
Well, 100%. I mean, this reminds me of the cognitive philosophers David Chalmers and Andy Clark's notion of the extended mind thesis.
Absolutely.
And these guys speculate that the mind is not limited to the skull, that we have a skin bag bias, that we assume that we end at the edge of our skin tissue. But in fact, the mind emerges in the feedback loops between brains, tools, and environments. And we're used to dovetailing our minds to our tools, but when our tools start talking back, communicating back, giving us real-time feedback in return, the distinction between self and world is going to fade. So the phenomenological experience for us is going to be a world that's pregnant with synchronicity and serendipity, a world that responds to our needs before we even know what we want. So it's truly a return to animism. It's a return to like indigenous cultures where the trees are alive and the sky talks to us and the world is literally re-enchanted.
That is a cool idea that's going to have to go into book 2 because it wasn't in book 1, but it's really good, and I'm stealing it for book 2. It's good.
Something else that you look at in the book I'm interested in, you also look at the future of ecstatic technologies. There's a look at psychedelics. There's this idea of like extending empathy. The future of consciousness is one where we have radically more empathy and also more pattern recognition. Can you get into that a little bit?
So there's a pharmacological compound that's sort of at the center of the thriller that is the book, and it extends empathy beyond the border of species, right? So it extends empathy into the animal world, which is a tough bridge for a lot of, like the human brain does in-group, out-group all the time, right? And the human-animal barrier is seen as involatile on a lot of levels, built into the Bible, right? Man has superiority over it. So human superiority, that whole ethos, right? The way to bridge that gap is empathy, and a drug that does it very, very quickly forces that change onto society, right? What happens suddenly if the whole world, if empathy expands by force very, very quickly, this thing that we think we really want, right? And which seems critical for our survival, but what happens if suddenly it's wildly expanded, right? Think about the destabilization of the 60s that was, LSD was a love revolution. It's not a very loving substance. It's kind of jagged and like, right? It's not exact. MDMA was a much better fit for that compound.
Agree with that.
So one of the things I was thinking about is the empathy. And the other thing, you know, that the book looks at is clearly one of the next frontiers is consciousness. And clearly, like, just at a low-hanging, what's coming next? Well, we know Lee Cronin is a Scottish chemist who's building the world's first 3D chem printer. So he's doing it for prescription drugs, so you don't have to go to Walgreens to get your drugs, but somebody's gonna hack it and it's gonna be open season. And we also know that AI and quantum, low-hanging fruit for both systems are drug discovery, and both systems are being designed, already designed, with user-friendly interfaces. So suddenly you have user-friendly interfaces, AI, quantum computing powered drug discovery design, and a 3D chem printer in your home through your, you know, phone probably. And so everybody, it's not just everybody gets to be a psychonaut, everybody literally gets to be Alexander Shulgin and like play with whatever substance you want.
Pharmacopoeia galore.
And I mean, think about all the revolutions that psychedelics have driven over the past 100 years, and think about the fact that that was essentially 5 or 6 drugs, right? And then we got a few more in the latter half of the century. And think about,
Psychedelics go exponentially.
right, psychedelics are about to go exponential. Consciousness exploration is about to go exponential.
New spaces, inner space.
And what the hell happened, right? You want to talk about the shifting fabric of reality and
Well,
the
a shifting
phenomena.
fabric of reality. I mean, just in the same way that you were talking before, like social media creating separate feedback loops and filter bubbles so that essentially people are bifurcating and living different realities. That's just with like external feedback loops
Right.
on social media.
Right.
When you also have people that can like essentially create a pharmacopoeia of psychedelics that change the felt lived experience of subjectivity, you start having like a kind of speciation or bifurcation of mind.
Yes.
So you have different kinds of minds that operate
that's-
differently.
it's
And
one
John
of the
Perry
things-
Barlow used to say reality is going to be one of the most relative terms we have. And
Oh, that's really good.
Yeah,
That's really good.
dude.
He's not wrong. And I do. One of the other things I really look heavily at the book is speciation.
Yeah.
Right. Humans, like we think because we live in this particular moment that Homo sapiens are like the one. But historically, right, there were many different sapien models running around.
Sure, that's
right.
right. That's right.
And clearly with genetic engineering,
Yeah.
with space travel,
Yes.
right, with synbiology,
Yes.
like we're going right there, right?
yeah.
The species is going to start to crack
a new
apart.
Cambrian explosion, you know, of
Exactly.
different kinds of minds. That's where we're
It's-
heading.
So Andrew Hessel, who you know, right, synthetic biologist and a friend of ours, I asked him at one point, I said, you know, do you think we're going to end up like with Gattaca-style perfect children? He was like, no, that's crazy. And I was like, why? He's like, people are endlessly creative.
Yeah.
You're going to custom build your child according to your creativity, and they're going to custom build it, right? And suddenly I was like, oh wow, we're going to get like genetic engineering of children as artistic expression of self, and
Full
that
on.
goes to
Full on.
right.
Well, I mean, it's Freeman Dyson's essay about the new age of wonder, where he talked about the future of synthetic biology, and he envisions a new generation of artists that are going to be writing genomes with the fluency that Blake and Byron wrote verses, which I always thought was so beautiful.
That's amazing.
You know,
That's
it's like,
beautiful.
oh,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we're going to play jazz with our genomes because we are made of language. DNA is code. We are alphabetic all the way down. We are made of information, and our capacity to program that very language of life means that we're going to fucking make symphonies out of ourselves, you know? And again, bifurcate, speciate, transmute,
Wow.
self-determination taken to the next level, you know? Whoa.
That's self-authoring at a whole new level, right?
Exactly.
At a genetic. Wow, that's an amazing idea.
Well, I'm excited about this book, dude. Do you want to like sort of tell us in one or two more sentences then, like the kind of rabbit hole that we can expect, you know, before
Oh,
we
yeah,
close
I mean,
this? This has been such a fascinating.
honest to God,
Yeah.
I've written, this is my 10th book, and I've covered animals,
Yeah.
disruptive technology, the environment, consciousness, psychedelics, everything, and there's only so much stuff you can talk about in nonfiction, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
because you're telling the truth,
Yeah.
right? So you can't, it's really hard to explore the
Yeah,
margins.
Yeah,
Exactly, right? Because you just sound cray-cray. So fiction allows you to actually play around the edge. So the Last Tango, if you like any of my books, all the ideas are in there, and I get to play with them and experiment with them in ways that I absolutely have never been able to do before.
Sometimes fiction is more truthful than reality, my friend. So I am excited. That's why I love movies and novels so much.
Yeah,
Because, they paint these worlds, these hyper realities, and they feel more real sometimes. Well, Steven, that was beautiful. Thank you guys all for watching Last Tango in Cyberspace, May 14th. Keep a lookout for it. It's going to be obviously a mind F. I'm super stoked, man. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Awesome.